How important do you think heartbreak is in terms of a man's journey into this adult man?
In many ways, heartbreak is a rite of passage. There's an African proverb that says, if we don't initiate our boys into men, they will light the village on fire just to watch it burn. It was literally a matter of life and death to break the selfish child psyche and allow for a service-driven adult male psyche to emerge. We need to be able to understand what we really want. The only way to understand what we really want is to go to those depths of ourselves that often feel uncomfortable.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this. Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. And today I have a really beautiful episode where I talked to Alejandro, which is such a beautiful name as well. What a beautiful name. I wish my name was as exotic and fun to say as his, but he's not just about his name. He's also incredibly gifted coach, men's work facilitator and guide. And we really get deep into, we actually end up talking about breakups and how breakups are such an initiation for men into their personal growth. I would say about 40 to 70% of the men that I work with who come to me because they've had a breakup and they've uncovered all this stuff about themselves. And they're wanting to, shift and change and be better. That's one of the most common things. We really go into a lot of depths about why breakups is such a rites of passage, why it really helps with our emotional range, some of the unhealthy ways that we cope with breakups, and how we can thrive out of a breakup, which I think is a really important part, because I think it's so possible to come out of a breakup and look back and go, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think of one particular breakup I've spoken about many times on a podcast. I had my heart absolutely broken. And it's one of the best things that ever happened to me because it really changed how I related. It taught me so much. And then we kind of shift in talking about the culture of relationships. How can we create good cultures within our relationships? Because it's really, taking responsibility, acting in certain ways, communicating in certain ways that are really, really good for us. And we touched upon also like how we could be better men. Really at the core of a lot of what we talked about was like the importance of going deeper into who we are as men so we can be better men, whether that's better in relationship, better in our business, better with our friendships and so forth, because ultimately those are the areas of our lives that really matter to us. We talk about leadership and also we talk about why red pill takes people on down the wrong path and how they've become disembodied from actually helping people find the authenticity and the truth of their experience. So I'm going to stop there. Stop yabbering on. And we'll let you get into this wonderful conversation. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode where we dive into some important matters around men and relationships. Because I think when it comes to men and relationships, men get a really bad rap in relationships, I think. I think they're easy... They're an easy rod for the back, I think is the phrase we use in English, which I've probably butchered there. But I think that when it comes to relationships, men get a really, really bad rap. And there's some ways in which we can be better. It's basic to just generalize all men together. But I want to dive into that today, talking about relationships. And today's guest is a man who I followed for some time, and I've really enjoyed his posts. There's such a beautiful integrity and strength to what he's putting out in the world, and how he calls men forward to step out of a lot of the patterns that get in the way of not just the way that we are in relationship and relate, but within ourselves. So our integrity, our capacity, our focus, and so forth, which impact our lives, our businesses, but also our purpose and our relationships as well. How are you doing today, Jose?
I'm doing great. Feel honored to be here. Excited to dive into the conversation of relationships, and I'm happy you started off by saying men get a bad rap. Let's change that rap.
No, it's hilarious because it's funny you say that. Like my partner's also a coach, and she works with women, and through we do a little bit of couples work together, but we also coach each other's clients, and through that process, she finds herself often with her clients almost defending men. You know, when her clients are like, "Oh, this guy saw he did this, he did that," she'll. Because she's heard me speak so much, and we speak so much about men in particular, and also she's coached my clients, she'll stand and talk to her clients and be like, well, if he's done that, what do you think his fears are, or his concerns are? And I find it really interesting. I know you're in Puerto Rico, if I remember rightly.
I am, yes.
Yes. In the UK here, when you look at a magazine or you look at a newspaper, you could almost be 90% sure that if it's about dating or relationships, that article was written by a woman. Almost 90%. And if you delve even deeper, like there's very few men talking about relationships. There's very few men of color talking about relationships, especially, you know, if we go down that avenue as well. It's very easy for men to get bad raps in this way. But I'd love to start to learn a bit more about you and find out, like, what was your journey to do the work that you do now?
Yeah, great question. I think like most men, my catalyst was relationship, and a big breakdown in my relationship. And I went into the work initially with the intention of saving the relationship. So there was like this, I got to do whatever it takes in order to not let this go, a step further, lose my partner, win her back, just like that language that I think both of us have heard a lot of men use. I'm grateful that it happened that way, because it woke me up and it allowed me to find the resources that have supported me along the journey and have, revealed my path. But the truth is, it was a breakdown in the relationship that really made me realize 5 years after getting my bachelor's in psychology that I should go see a therapist, that I should really explore all these parts of myself and not just understand them logically, but actually work through them. And it's also, my parents' relationship was also a catalyst. So just to give some context, throughout my entire life, my parents have been in an on and off relationship, right? So since I was conceived, and when I was 5, when I was 11, when I was 16, and then when I was 24, I moved out of my house, and 6 months later, they ended up separating. And that kind of, I always found myself in the middle of that situation, and kind of taking responsibility for something that I wasn't responsible for, but feeling like I was the reason they stayed together and were miserable, the reason why they broke up since I moved out. And then that just showed up in my relationship. And it's relationship brought me to where I'm at today in my purpose.
Got it. And as you said that it's so common for men to start to do the work because of relationship breakdown. You said the words, the number of men I've met who have come into my inbox or booked in a call, and they're like, I need to save this relationship, or I need to get my ex back. I think I think that's one of the most common Googled phrases when it comes to like dating and relationships. How do I get my ex back? I think, but I wonder, do you feel, how important do you think heartbreak is in terms of a man's journey to kind of moving from like a childishness or adolescence into kind of this adult man?
Yeah. Well, I think, this is where we get to start talking about the concept of rites of passage, right? Because in many ways, heartbreak is a rite of passage, right? Losing our virginity, first love, first job, all the first things are a rite of passage, but also, the breaking off from the last thing is also a rite of passage. And just from I did my rite of passage 4 years ago and been apprenticing as a guide for the past 3 years. And a big part of rite of passage is heartbreak. It's grief. It's grieving the part of ourselves that was and creating space for what's to come. And I think that oftentimes a relationship heartbreak is one of those, like, I guess, unintentional, unforeseen rites of passages that, without the right support system, without the right intention, without the right tools, it can also lead someone to kind of amplify or perpetuate more of unhealthy behavior. I've also seen a lot of men in the process of heartbreak with a solid system, like with a men's team and all of these things. And the heartbreak is still part of the experience. If anything, they're less likely to numb the heartbreak and to avoid it. But there's so much wisdom and power and beauty and deeper understanding of who we are, who they are, when they allow themselves to go through that pain and integrate it in a way that is supportive of them realizing who they really are. And that definitely was the experience for me. It was just like who do I want to be regardless of this relationship? If this relationship doesn't mend and turn into something more beautiful than what it was because we grew into something different, or if we part ways, what kind of man do I want to be? And I think that that's really something that, we talk a lot about rock bottom, and oftentimes men need to hit rock bottom in order to make a shift. And heartbreak is definitely one of those things that either gets us to rock bottom or spirals us into rock bottom in all other areas of our lives.
Yeah. As you say, rock bottom there. I'm thinking back to my own life, and heartbreak is something that's kind of punctuated my life many times. Actually, I think about it now, and it feels like the rock bottom it feels and looks different at different times, in different kind of phases of my life. When I was in my early 20s, rock bottom would probably be really hidden from the world, and maybe as I got into my 30s, it would be a bit more like open about that with the people in my life, my friends, my family, even. But I wondered, what are some of the common behaviors you see in men when some of the unhealthy behaviors that they go for a breakup or a relationship's breaking down? What are some of the unhealthy behaviors that they start to engage in to kind of cope and numb?
Yeah, overworking is the first one that comes up. Like over blank, just add anything after the word over. I made a post recently about unhealthy behaviors that often are rewarded by society. Right? So they're like oftentimes seen as something that we should be doing, or will be we're just rewarded for doing more of it. But oftentimes they can get to a point where they are disconnecting us from the experience. They're numbing us. Overworking is the first one that comes up because I work with a lot of impact-driven men. I work with a lot of men who are in leadership positions, entrepreneurs, and oftentimes I find that after a breakup or after heartbreak, they will completely disconnect from the uncomfortable feelings and emotions and do whatever they can in order to avoid it. So whether that's over consuming of information in order to feel like they are, bettering themselves, over consuming of porn, just more sexual behavior, but from a place of pain, overworking, but not necessarily doing so in a productive way. It's more of like anything they can do in order to avoid the pain. But I find usually it's on the over with men that I work with, that I deeply resonate with that experience. But I also see men who numb out in other ways and completely disconnect from their work and completely disconnect from everything in their life and isolate and numb out, without necessarily, same thing, just avoiding the pain, but just in the other direction.
So it's like some men will overindulge in work or whatever, like you said. And I guess it's this tricky balance to find where it's like, there's work there. Let me, it's very easy to pour ourselves into it and feel like, I'm doing the right thing. I've got this work to do. Let me put this energy to good use. And it might go towards work. And that's a very easy one to explain to anybody. But it also can be, like you said, porn. It can be partying, it can be drink. It can be pouring that energy back into dating other women, having sex. And then there's a kind of the underinflated, which is like, I think of the impotent lover, actually, that maybe just kind of wallows at home, eating ice cream and feeling sad and sorry for themselves. Which I laugh because I remember doing that when I was about 19 and I had a breakup myself. And I was just like, oh my God, life isn't worth living type of thing. But it feels like it's actually quite a tricky balance to me, isn't it? Because what there is this avoidance of the feelings of the thing that is present. It's like, this thing present, this breakup is present. But let me do something to run away from those feelings, either overindulge in something or underindulge in something. And it's like that tricky balance of how do I find that middle place of being with, sitting with what I'm feeling and looking at it from a place of kind of healthy, emotional discernment as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, it would be unhealthy to like just completely wallow and to just like lose ourselves in the grief and the pain. Obviously, we've got bills to pay, we've got projects we're working on, we've got businesses we're running. I think this goes into the conversation of why it's so important to have safe containers and spaces, especially with other men, where we can kind of know, all right, this Thursday, I've got my men's call. I've got a lot of grief. Maybe I allow myself to feel it over the last couple of days in private, but I really need some space to allow myself to process this. It's so important to have that container where we can actually feel that pain, feel that grief, and then also create, sometimes, I've coached men who are in the process of heartbreak, and sometimes I literally invite them to schedule grieving time on a daily basis, set 10 minutes aside after, your work day, and just allow yourself to write, journal about how you've been feeling today, journal about the feelings that you've been kind of having to put aside or compartmentalize while you were in these business meetings, or while you were making this deal, or while you were doing this work, or while you were having these, podcast conversations, or whatever it is. Cause, oftentimes I think we could also forget, there's times where I have grief that's underneath the surface. And sometimes I literally forget to create time and space for it. So sometimes just like having that scheduled time, just sit and not do anything and allow it to come to the surface. And I find writing is a great way to do that. And then obviously the next level to that would be having a space where you have mirrors or people that can hold that expression in a more, I guess in a more, with more of the words that describe it rather than just like writing.
Yeah. I think of, there's John Wallon's got a free practice, a grief practice that he has. Well, I have access to it, but it definitely was on his website for a while. And it's very similar. His is just an embodiment practice, with like feeling the grief. And it's something that I've given to quite a few men. And the number of them have come back and been like, wow, I knew I was sad, but I didn't realize I had all this other stuff, like this wailing and crying, or I've taken them through some breath work for, half an hour, 40 minutes, and just journeyed them into the grief and allow them the space in that container of that session to feel the grief that's there. And so many of them have afterwards have come and been like, my God, it was so, almost this sense that the grief is never ending. The fear that if they start to feel the grief and be with it, that it will just continue forever, that experience and that feeling of those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I have a mentor who lost a son about 2021, so about 3 years ago, and he's one of the most joyful people that I know, right? And he's always bringing joy into whatever space that he's in, and always just amazes me how is it he's able to do that after such a huge heartbreaking experience, right? Losing a child, and his son was in his 20s, and I mean, no age, it doesn't matter the age, but I think his son had just done a rite of passage. He got to an age where he was becoming a man, so there was an experience there for him that I don't think anybody can describe unless they've experienced it. And because he had the resources and the tools to grieve, I mean, he told me that's the only, that allowing himself to grieve, and that process of grieving and those containers to intentionally go to the depths of that heartbreak are what allowed him to have that range to feel that depth of joy as well, right? So it's interesting because it can, you hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of men are afraid that once they allow themselves to grieve, they're going to be in that like perpetual state of pain and dysregulated emotion, right? And I think that yes, grief is I think a lifelong process. My mentor, I think he always says a part of him is always grieving. He thinks about his son every day, but the more he creates space to allow himself to feel that pain, the more he can kind of come out of that space and feel like he has the space to hold other emotions and to be with life. So I see that with men often as well. The more that they actually create space for the grief, the less it's actually consuming every moment of their life, right? So it's actually the opposite. I think oftentimes men think that if they suppress emotions, if they don't allow themselves to move those emotions, then they go away, but they never really go away. They just end up just like getting stored and just leaking all over the place, or exploding in a moment where someone triggers us in a way that maybe just like takes it right over the edge and makes it all just flow out.
Wow, that's incredible. To hear that, like my son passing at 20 years old, you can just only, all I can do is imagine the sadness, the fear, the anger, the grief, and to, as you described, be one of the most joyful people. A lot of people listen to that and like, wow, the journey to get there. As you said, he has support systems, he has people, he has his men to support him to take him to that grief. But also, like you said, and I see this a lot, and I imagine you see this a lot with men, is like when so many men are living in that space of like, okay, I'm cool, I'm okay, I'm not too bad. Like I call it the kind of like 4 to 6 range. If you ask them about their emotional experience at any time, in any, week or day of the year, they probably tell you that between a 4 and a 6. They almost don't know what it feels like to kind of get deep into a 3, and that could be a 3 of joy, a 3 of sadness, whatever, or sorry, like a 1 or a 2, because they never really go there. But through the practice, kind of what you described around the writing, grief practice, and what I called about the embodiment grief practice or breathing, it allows, as you said, men to expand that range of emotion, so they can take themselves to that grief or sadness that they fear will be never ending. But it also gives them the opposite end range, which is to feel the beautiful joy of just seeing, you know, a tree to start growing, a sapling, or it's spring here in the UK. So it's like all the trees are starting to get green, and then some of the flowers are coming out, and being able to actually feel that joy of just seeing those things as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I find you mentioned that they haven't experienced a 3 or a 2 or a 1, and if they're giving a number that is 4 to 6, knowing that there's other options, I think they kind of understand and know that there's more. They understand that there's an opportunity to feel more of that, and I find that that comes from one or two places. Either one, like a hope or a vision, hope and desire for more joy, for more or an opportunity to feel that emotion more. But on the other hand, it's also a reflection of something they've already felt. Maybe they've accessed before, but they are having difficulty connecting back to. Because, you know, I think this goes into the realm of vision. If we could see something, that means it's possible, but it also means that it's a projection of something that we already, you know, feel inside of ourselves. It's something that we've already been inspired by. So if someone says, you know, I'm feeling 4 to 6, and they know there's a 1 of joy, right? It's almost like I know there's more joy to be felt, and I would love to be there, just not accessing it right now. So I always find it as like, I find it more concerning when a man doesn't look like he's fully expressing himself and his feeling his joy, but says a 1. You know, it's almost like a disconnect of like he's saying that he's feeling this much, but he's not actually expressing it. To me, that's more concerning. If someone says they're a 4, but that kind of tells me he's being honest about where he's at, and he desires to feel more of that emotion. And that just opens up the door to possibility.
Yeah. There's nothing like, and I'm sure you see this, I see this in my work, is where you say to someone, you know, how are you feeling today? And they say with a very neutral, very dry tone, I'm feeling really excited. And you think to yourself, like, really? Are you sure you're excited? Because I'm not feeling any excitement. I've actually had like coaching sessions that started with that statement of like, I'm feeling really excited. And it's been said in the most kind of almost neutral way, and really gone through from the intellectual idea of excitement. Like, I know what excitement is, and to kind of take a man into feeling the actual excitement so that it's an embodied and is experienced by others, because that's such a different experience for how the world receives us, or how our partner receives us, how our friends receive us, when we can go from just the intellectual idea of emotions and feelings of like excitement and joy, but actually then translate that into like a physical sensation that is felt and can be transmitted, can be expressed to others for them to also feel our emotion, our excitement.
Right. Yeah. I think when you said intellectualized excitement, I think you know, we kind of know when we should be feeling excited. Right. So I definitely see that with I mean, on the other side of it as well, I'm feeling grief. You know, guys will say that after heartbreak, whether it's a loss, it's a breakup, whatever it is. They say they're feeling sad, but they haven't allowed themselves to actually feel the sadness. They're just saying, I feel sad, because they know that that's what they should be feeling in that moment. But they haven't actually felt the sadness. They're thinking sad, right? It's like they're thinking sad thoughts or they're thinking joyful thoughts, right? There's a difference between thinking joyful thoughts and thinking sad thoughts and thinking grief and actually feeling the experience of those things. So I definitely resonate and have and have done that myself. You know, I can definitely see, especially when I'm on the, it's just like again, going back to the overworking, right? It's like I know I should be feeling sad, but I don't have time to feel sad. I'm just going to say I feel sad, and that's going to be my way of giving it some space. And it's like, wait, no, but like, it's actually more productive for you to take some space and time off from what you're doing and feel the sadness so that you can come back to that with much more energy and vitality. But you got to actually feel it. You can't just say that that's what's present.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I was thinking, as we talked about like breakups and the struggles and stuff, and I wonder what your thoughts on are. What are the ways in which kind of as men we can thrive out of a breakup, out of a relationship breakdown, and use it as like a springboard into our own growth and our own kind of relational capacity going forward? Yeah.
Well, I think, we discussed the first step, and it's actually feeling, feeling the heartbreak. And I think the second step is deciding, and John Wannon talks about this often, taking ownership for taking responsibility for the culture of the relationship, right? It's like, no matter what we think, who we think was at fault or what we think happened, oftentimes we could like go down this shame spiral of what we could have, would have, should have done differently. And I think, really taking ownership and getting clear about what we can do going forward, whether it's in that relationship or another relationship. It's kind of like, okay, well, I think that I guess a way to put it into a question is, do you feel like you put it all on the table, right? Like, can you actually walk away from this regardless of how it ended and say that you were committed to being the best version of yourself in this relationship that you could possibly be? And the answer is no. I mean, I think we all can always find like a gap in something. We're never 100% in integrity. The answer is no. Make a list of those things that you would want to, see in yourself, regardless of being with that person or not, right? What kind of man do you want to be in relationship and out of relationship? And almost like an integrity inventory, right? I think it's also challenging and probably even more difficult than feeling the emotions, but it's also empowering. One thing that I see when men make that list, or men think of like all the ways they can take ownership for the culture of their relationship, then they could create solutions, and it creates kind of like this self-respect. Like, wow, like regardless of what happened, this is something I have control over, I can take ownership of, I can move forward with. And that is kind of like where the journey of self-love starts to, because like feeling the emotions is part of the journey of self-love, but also like taking ownership and not, blaming anyone for how the relationship turned out, not blaming, society, or not blaming not having the right tools. Like, here's where I am, here's where I stand, here's how I showed up, here's how I did it, and here's what I'm going to do about it in order to become the best man that I could be, regardless of the relationship. That's just like that's the ultimate form of self-love, in my opinion, and self-respect. It's like, I decide what kind of man I want to be, regardless of the circumstances that I'm currently in. And I think another step after that is obviously having mirrors and people around you that can support you along that journey, because it's easy to just repeat the same cycle. I think one thing I find, serial monogamy is something I see often with a lot of the men that I work with. So as soon as they break up they're about to break up, or the relationship is experiencing a breakdown, or the relationship ended, they find a way to, they immediately find someone to fill that void, right? Instead of actually looking for ways to fill that void themselves. So those are the two things that come up to really take it to the next step, is having mirrors that can really reflect back our blind spots, hold us accountable to taking ownership of the culture of our life, not just the relationship, and then also kind of holding us accountable to the standard we're committing to hold in our lives. Because otherwise, it's pretty easy to just repeat the same cycle, or end up in the same trauma bond, in the same self-sabotaging pattern, in the same ways that we, I guess, short-term soothe ourselves, but long-term kind of just stay stuck in the same pattern that got us to the heartbreak in the first place.
Yeah. And it's the blame is so easy for people to fall into. I see. So I think sometimes we live in a culture of blames, a culture of excuses and finger pointing. And, I see a lot of men fall into this just blaming women blanket, like women are like this, and this is why relationships are that way. But what I'm hearing from you saying, what I've seen from my own personal experience and experience of my clients, is when we start to take responsibility for what's gone on in the relationship, the big moments and the small moments, the way in which we've shown up, and we take like real responsibility, it's really empowering, because we can look at the way that we've communicated. We can look at the way that we maybe disconnected slightly in moments, or the way that we made love to our partner, which wasn't present, or we can look at the ways that we reacted to their emotion with escalation or hostility or defensiveness. When we take responsibility for that, that empowers us, because we suddenly are in a space of, oh, I could have been better in those moments, or I could have handled that better or differently in those moments. So when I move forward, I'm empowered to change or make a difference or evolve in those areas. Whereas if we are in that kind of pity party that, oh, it's all hurtful, or all women are like this, or relationships are hard, we are actually declaring ourselves as quite powerless.
Right. Yeah. And it's very, and I appreciate you sharing that. It's very interesting, because oftentimes the way that we could take radical responsibility could have been having a conversation much sooner. It could have been owning the consequences of your fullest expression. It could have been like being clear about how values didn't align. Oftentimes relationships actually go on much longer than they should have, and there was actually a lack of alignment that could have been addressed much sooner. Sometimes taking full ownership is identifying that something's out of alignment and bringing it forth, and possibly leading to the breakup in the relationship happening much sooner, right? But that is a reflection of taking full ownership, which is on the inverse. I think a lot of men also, especially those that are in the spaces that we're in. I see a lot of men that I work with who kind of started reading The Way of the Superior Man and all the men's emotional intelligence books. They also think that they have to take responsibility for their partner's projections, right? So it's like there's a difference between cultivating that depth, that grounded presence, taking radical responsibility and ownership for the culture of the relationship. But that's different. It's difference between that and taking responsibility for our partner's projections. So what I see is oftentimes that men also on one end, I think as a society, like you said, where there's a blaming culture, and there's like we're always trying to find a scapegoat and someone to blame for why we're having challenges in a relationship, having challenges in our life, etc. I think on the other hand, there's with men, like I said, that are kind of on the journey and on this path, are often like, well, I have to breathe deeper. I have to, she showed up this way. So what am I doing wrong? And like, yes, full ownership is having those mirrors around you, having the courage to take a look at every moment and asking ourselves, what is it that I can do? Not better, but what I can do more authentically, with more compassion, with more honesty, without giving away my power either, right? Without like putting, I guess in other ways, like putting our partner in a pedestal, right? And not actually creating the relationship that fulfills us and nourishes us and allows us to bring all of ourselves to our partner as well, rather than, kind of relinquishing our power and giving ourselves only to manipulate someone and hold them as our own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because it's so easy in this kind of men's work, and you start to actually, what I want to say, something I come to believe is it's so easy when we start to get into like men's work and polarity work and sacred union work and stuff, so forth, for it to be a playground of people just to play out their drama and trauma in a relationship and just put it under like, oh, I'm in my divine feminine and I'm just expressing myself, or a man to be like, oh, I'm just standing in my masculine. This is, I'm strong and I'm being aggressive and so forth. And I think it's so easy for us to kind of bypass the very basic foundations of creating a healthy relationship, if that all makes sense. Yeah. Which are, the things like communication and boundaries, and they're the unsexy things. Sexual polarity is wonderful to play with and to create, but like, it doesn't really get you anywhere if you can't have a conversation about how you're feeling, or what you desire, what you need, or how you want the relationship to be, or how you want to like talk to each other and look after each other and so forth. That kind of sprung to mind when you were saying there about men feeling that they should need to take responsibility for their partner's projections, because it's so easy to be like, she's acting this way. She's acting, I want a better word than the word I'm going to use now. She's acting dysregulated. And it's like, well, I'm taking 100% responsibility in this relationship. So this is my doing. I need to change something in me. Or it's very easy for a man to go into blame and actually be like, there's something wrong with me. Like, I'm
Right.
broken, or shame, I'm broken, and like something's wrong with me. Like, and that blame that can be externally projected, just put back onto himself.
Yeah. Which I think is a very, I think oftentimes masculine feminine dynamics are weaponized. I think we see it a lot on social media. It can be easy to say, a man should X, Y, Z, and it's just like perpetuating more of the thing that masculine feminine dynamics is. The energetics of it is actually kind of, it's the opposite of, right? And I think that when it comes to this type of conversation, there is I think I heard John Wineland say this maybe a year or so ago. He said in sexual intimacy and in like the intimacy space, polarity is a gift. You choose to kind of hold an energy that feels most aligned for you in order to create magic. Outside of it, the work is really to become more integrated. And we can only become more integrated if we stop making it all about masculine and feminine dynamics, right? It's like there for a lot of men, there's a lot of the overworking, a lot of the sexual escapades, a lot of all the things that we spoke about in the beginning. It's really a shame game. It's this running away from this part of themselves that they're ashamed of, right? So I find that a lot of conversations I have with men, it's kind of teaching them the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is pretty healthy. I mean, guilt allows us to feel where we're out of alignment with our standards, with our values. Not everyone feels guilty about the same thing. And whenever we feel guilty, it's just a reflection of something that we're not living up to. Shame, on the other hand, where guilt says I did something bad, shame says I am bad, right? And I find that a lot of times with what we were speaking about, men, will have quote unquote the answers or the information from all these books, these podcasts, these social media posts, and then it won't go as planned because they haven't really embodied it, and then they just use that as a way to kind of like amplify the shame and how they feel about themselves. Like, well, this is something that should be working, but it's not working for me, so therefore I'm inherently bad, right? There's something wrong with me. I'm broken. And that can only be we can only work through that if we actually look at the parts of ourselves that like go much deeper than just masculine and feminine dynamics, right? It goes into just the childhood trauma, past experiences, our shadow, and just all the things that maybe created heartbreak before we were even in a relationship, right? Not feeling enough of our mother's love or father's approval, and all these different things just kind of being amplified in relationship. And I think that kind of goes into the conversation about the red pill community. And you said this at the beginning, like the biggest Google search that men make is how to win my ex back, and like all that content that feeds that insecurity often focuses on how to manipulate women in order for you to feel powerful, right? But doesn't really address how to get a woman to say yes, how to get a woman to stay, how to get a woman to come back, how to win a woman over on the first date, how to get a woman to have sex with you in the first date. Like all these different things are really, I find oftentimes coming from a place of insecurity of like, here are the tools to manipulate someone in order to feel powerful. And we forget the at the core to really address we forget to address the core issue, which is, all of us have past experiences that influence our relationships. Our relationships bring out the most uncomfortable parts of ourselves, the most, the biggest wounds, the biggest, just everything that's underneath the surface. And we can't ignore it just by, learning the tricks. It's like, they're not tricks. They're really just, they're tools that help kind of amplify our most authentic self. But if we're not connected to our most authentic self, it just becomes a weapon.
Yeah. Beautifully said, man. Really beautifully said. Because I'm thinking of, I started my self-development journey. I guess I'd say at the beginning of it was me getting into the world of pickup many years ago. And that was the first place where I'd been where men supported other men. It was a real experience for me in so many positive ways. But it's a similar thing, isn't it? That what the pickup guys did is they looked at what successful men were doing with women, and they kind of like, analyzed it and backwards engineered it. But what they lost out on was the authentic expression of those men. And it's kind of similar for some of the polarity teachings, is that people, instead of looking at their authentic expression of why they're doing the thing, they just take the teaching. They, like you said, they take the podcast, they take the tantra retreat, they take the Instagram post and then try and do it. But it's still coming from a place of insecurity and wounding and not feeling enoughness. And in fact, that can create far worse results than if they took a more, say, steady route, which was uncovering their authenticity and self-expression slowly and gently within their relationships.
It is more uncomfortable though, right? So it's definitely more uncomfortable to take that road and to feel those parts of ourselves and to be with the discomfort. But this, I guess this is a good way to tie it back to the importance of rites of passage, right? Because otherwise, without I think we all come from ancestors who practiced nature-based rites of passages, and it was literally a matter of life and death. If there's an African proverb that says, "If we don't initiate our boys into men, they will light the village on fire just to watch it burn." Right. So it's like it was literally a matter of life and death to from a psychological perspective, break the selfish child psyche and allow for a service-driven adult male psyche to emerge. And I think that, everything that you just described is really uninitiated, especially when we look at all that information, like uninitiated men trying to initiate men, and there's just more amplification of like manipulative, insecurity driven behavior. And I think it does serve a purpose, right? So a lot of I Googled all those things that you mentioned when I had my breakdown in relationship, because I didn't know where to find the right resources, right? My father really didn't know how to support me through that. He held space for me, but he didn't really know like how to support me through that experience. I didn't know that, I had heard about men's groups, but I didn't know where to find one. I didn't know what right books. So I was just Googling, and obviously the red pill stuff usually tends to have the better SEO and all that stuff. So it was like the first ones that, I just kept going and going and going until I found, a podcast that spoke about masculine emotional intelligence that led me to a book called Grow Up, Man's Guide to Masculine Emotional Intelligence. That led me to Iron John and Four Archetypes. And then I could almost feel it in my body. I could tell. It's like, okay, this is like powerful, but it doesn't require me to disconnect from compassion, disconnect from my emotions. Like I think men understand it. It's just, the other stuff, it's based in some truths, right? But it just ends up kind of taking a turn because there's an aspect that's missing. So oftentimes men feel empowered by it. And, it starts off with the conversation about working out, taking ownership, take responsibility, discipline, all these things that are really positive and actually a lot of men lack in their lives. It's that masculine edge. But then it starts to drift off and it goes into the conversation that we spoke about, where it's like manipulate and take and overpower, which usually comes from a lack of knowing oneself and the power that we have innately, that doesn't require us to overpower anyone in order to express it.
Yeah. It's kind of this gets lost in the essence, gets lost in translation, and it's so easy to do when we're trying to find a formula. And I think this is the thing that's often we can fall into in all aspects of our life, I think, as men, is wanting a formula. Like, give me the formula that I can just do all the steps and reach the end without really having to engage in feeling, thinking, being, intuiting, because that's where, like, I see red pill, sometimes I've had clients who got really deep into that world and have come to me, or men I know who are very interested in certain figures, and they're like, oh yeah, but this is how women are. And, I'm like, but what you're looking for is this formula that's like, you can follow for every single eventuality, but life isn't that simple, right? There's a flow and a responsiveness that is needed both to get into relationship and to be in one and create a healthy culture that can just be lost if we're looking to like write out a formula for relationship that is finite and we can just always go back to.
Yeah, I love we love to fix things, right? So fixing things, like we want the IKEA manual to relationships, right? So, and it's just not that simple, right? Like and I think what makes life beautiful is the fact that it's not simple, and an IKEA manual. Maybe for building a business it does, but even then, I tend to see a lot of men struggle with that at some point, where there's a lot of strategy and information out there on how to scale, how to grow a business, but without the connection to our heart, without the understanding of how to be firm and kind, without the emotional intelligence. Without emotional intelligence, we can't really be a leader that creates sustainable impact and grows, whatever it is that we're creating to its fullest potential. And I think there was a study I was looking at. I don't want to say the numbers wrong, but it was something above, I think it was 90% of what makes the biggest impact in leadership and entrepreneurship is emotional intelligence, right? If we can't, at the very basic level, if we can't regulate ourselves and our nervous system and our emotions and respond to them rather than react, we're going to make a lot of bad decisions, right? And then every single thing that comes at us, every challenge, every inevitable stress factor that comes with building a business, we're going to make decisions based on discomfort, right? So I think oftentimes men put that emotional intelligence piece as like my therapist says is important, but beyond that, we are not allowing ourselves to reach our full potential if we don't integrate all these parts of ourselves and actually step into the unknown without the manual, right? Because that's really where the wisdom is at. We can't predict everything, and if we try to predict it, what ends up happening is we only take action when we have that manual, and then we miss out on this whole range of opportunity in other areas that maybe we have the skill set, or we could have expanded into that because we had the capacity, or we were right at that threshold. But we're just looking for, if I don't have the manual, that I won't take that action. I'm only going to do things that have the manual. And then we end up living someone else's life. We're never actually live our own, because we're making decisions based off a blueprint that's not ours.
It's like continuously looking for the perfect moment to take. I need all the boxes have to be ticked to take the action. It's a bit like, and I see this for a lot of men in terms of relationship, of getting into a relationship really difficult because they're constantly unsure. Like, oh my God, how do I know if she's right for me? Like, how do I know if she's right? Like, what is the manual, the IKEA manual? And I'm just going to throw in a little, not joke, but something happened to me last night. We bought something from IKEA, and I was putting it together, and I followed all the instructions, put it together, and I shit you not, right? One of the legs on this table is about a centimeter shorter than the rest of them, or it doesn't appear that way, but however I've configured it and put it together meant that it felt like it was like wobbly. And we were looking at this thing and being like, I followed all the instructions. I did all the things that it said to do, and it didn't work. But just laughing as you said IKEA manual, because I can see the little IKEA, man in my head.
Yeah, even IKEA legs can be defective, man. Like it's someone was at the factory and had a bad day, and they chopped off a centimeter from the leg. So it's, at the end of the day, it's all part of the human experience. And hey, now you have a story to tell. Keep the IKEA.
Yeah, and it's this thing I see with a lot of men. It's like, how do I know if the relationship is right? Does it need to tick these boxes? And like you're saying, it's one of the things I think we really need the skills we need to learn to be great men or great relationship is to be able to take action when the circumstances are not perfect, where the circumstances are as kind of good as they're going to get, or they're okay, or we feel that this just feels like a good moment. Like intuitively, we feel like, okay, this is an opportunity to take, or this is not an opportunity to take, without needing this constant manual or tick box or someone else to kind of tell us how to do things. As you said, we end up living someone else's life. And, I think many of us have been there. We've lived the life of the people we thought we should emulate, only to get to a place where we felt pretty fucking miserable.
Yeah, and it's a big part of my story is all really just reflecting on all the ways that I was negotiating my truth for the sake of preserving relationships, negotiating my truth for the sake of preserving financial status, negotiating my truth for the sake of receiving a promotion, for the sake of preserving the peace, so many ways that, a big conversation that I have with a lot of men is the concept of integrity, right? And just like, what does it mean to be a man of integrity? I think oftentimes we think it means giving your word and following through on it. That's only one aspect of it, because I can think of so many ways that I've given my word, I've made a commitment, followed through on it, but felt resentment, felt disconnected from the experience, felt like I was furthest out of integrity with myself than I've ever been, no matter how big the commitment and the follow through was. And with that understanding, then came like a shift towards the direction that felt more aligned, which also comes with consequences. So, I think that's another thing. There's getting clear, there's communicating it and expressing it and bringing it through action. And then there's the consequences, because the truth is that when we are living in our truth, when we are taking action, when we are having the difficult conversation, when we are making commitments that are in alignment with what we really want out of our lives, there's going to be people that don't like it, people that disagree with it, relationships that that come to an end, relationships that evolve. And I think that's really more of a sign of a strong leader. I think, oftentimes I've found that men they're more scared about the consequences of an action than they are about their capacity to take the action, right? It's like they're afraid of what may happen, how their partner may react, how their boss may react, right? We often rather ghost someone, lose a relationship, lose a friend, than have an uncomfortable conversation. And most of the time, that uncomfortable conversation, if it's aligned with our deepest truth, actually only brings more beauty into our lives, right? But that's where the unknown comes in, right? Because a lot of the times, the IKEA manual is the safe way to play it, right? And we were actually missing out on the most joyful experiences, which usually are behind the unknown and not behind the blueprint that we mentioned is someone else's reflection of someone else's guaranteed bet.
Yeah. It's that being so afraid of like making a mistake or doing it wrong or doing it in the way, not doing it in the right way. This kind of obsession with not perfection. It's like getting it. There is a right way, and I need to find the right way before I take action. It just creates this massive procrastination in our lives, in our leadership, or like you said, can push away many great opportunities, whether those opportunities are relationships or business opportunities, because we just were so afraid of the consequences of it going wrong. We spend so much energy in like pouring so much of our energy into like, oh, but what if I get this wrong, or I don't do it in the right way? What are people going to think of me? Is that fear of judgment mixed with the kind of belief that there is a right way to do things.
Yeah, and there's no right way to do things. I mean, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about here is like every sentence could be turned into a cliche, like Instagram post, but it's true. There's just no right way to do things. Literally one, and I see this sometimes live. Like I'll go into a coaching call with one man, and then 3 hours later with another man, and the action that was perfectly aligned for this man is just completely misaligned for this one. And sometimes the same man, like what worked out in this relationship, 4 months down the line, they're exploring a new relationship, or they're exploring a new dynamic with someone else, or a dynamic with someone new. And what they did in this past relationship that worked there, whether it be, emotional intimacy, sexual intimacy, it doesn't matter. Like that same move or action is just like completely different result in this side, in this experience. And unless we have like that, really the intuitive understanding, which comes from empathy, which comes from understanding of ourselves, we can't really understand what the quote unquote right move is unless we have that connection to that part of ourselves that, again, has no owner's manual, is only learned as we have those difficult experiences, the heartbreak, those moments of level one joy that we described. So it's really interesting to see just how, which is why, this in our work, like giving advice only it leads to like blowing up it just blows up in your face, especially in our men's teams. Like other men often feel like they had the manual. They're like, I just want to give you like this thing that worked for me. And then, sometimes even though they know our standard or our ground rules in the space, like they'll slide it in like the Telegram chat. And then the guy goes and does it. And then a week later, he's like, you fucking asshole. This didn't go as planned. So it's just very, very interesting to see like how it makes us feel useful when we have the quote unquote manual, I want to offer it to another man, but it never, if he didn't come to that conclusion on his own, it never, even if it does work out, it becomes a crutch and it doesn't give that man his actual, it takes away that man's power. Right. So I see it also how it plays out. We want to fix, right? So if we can't fix our own shit, right, we might have the biggest blind spot and the biggest breakdown in our own relationship, but we see a man say, I'm having difficulty with this, and we just want to give him the answer because we figured that part out. But no one's got the answers for anyone,
No. And it's like we have to almost run it through our unique personality and the unique personalities of the people we're interacting with. It's like, I think I was with my partner and another couple, and I think I said a particular kind of joke that me and my partner have. I can't remember what it was. And the guy, my partner also was laughing and blah, blah, blah. And the guy said to me afterwards, he was just like, there is no way in hell I could say those words that you said to my partner and get the reaction that you got. And I was just like, but this is how I've created this whole relationship thing to be in this way. So some things that may seem offensive to other people are just part of our kind of standard jokes. And it is that piece. It's like, it's not the piece of advice of itself on its own is kind of meaningless to the kind of general sea of who we are, who we're interacting with, and the ways that we set things up, and the way that we're going to kind of take those actions and speak those things out or in our lives because of who we are. It's like, I put it into this way of, I love to be super playful with my partner. So sometimes she'll say something really serious to me, and then I'm like, I don't know, I'll pretend I'm some character from a movie or something like that. And that works for me, on who I am. But if I told another man to do that with his partner, like you said, it could completely blow up the whole situation for him and make things infinitely worse.
Right. And I think there's principles, right? There's I mean, we enjoy this work, and we're obviously supporting men and empowering men, and there's a lot of valuable information and I guess principles, right? Like when I hear you talk about just now, like in your own relationship, you pretend you're a character from a movie. Really, on a deeper level, that's just bringing some levity to the space. But the way that man brings levity into the relationship is completely different than um, than the way another man does. And in one situation, might actually require more seriousness than levity, right? And in another situation, this person that we're in relationship with, they're what they see as humorous or would allow them to feel the levity is like there's so many variables, but the principle is levity, right? Like we can share with a man that have you tried, bringing some levity into space, bringing some humor, maybe tussling with the anger that you feel from your partner, and seeing if there's an approach you can take that you haven't tried before. But like you said, the specifics, there's nothing specific about anything in life, whether it be relationships or business. And I mean, and I see this in business too. It's like before going into coaching and men's work, I was in marketing. So I got my bachelor's in psychology. I went into marketing for about 7 years, and then I started my own agency and was supporting men in the well-being space. So like well-being brands and growing their business. And 10% of it was strategy. The under 90%, I was already gaining a lot of tools from my men's spaces and workshops that I was attending. And I realized I ended up, like coaching and supporting men 90% of the time through their own personal experience than the strategy. Because one strategy that worked perfectly for one brand, maybe they went in this direction and tried this thing. Someone else would try to replicate that exact same strategy, and it would just be a massive fail, or it would be something that just did not align with their brand or took them out of integrity with what it is that they were trying to create. And when we started working on the individual and kind of exploring on the personal level, it's more like, well, what's an integrity for you? How do you feel when you're doing this versus when you're doing that? It's whether it be relationships or business or anything else in life, it's like we need to be able to understand what we really want. The only way to understand what we really want is to go to those depths of ourselves that often feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I laugh because, it always kind of comes back to whether it's relationship, whether it's business, whether it's getting over a breakup, is being a willingness to go deeper into who we are. For the recipe for success, man, if you're listening to this, the recipe for success is the willingness to go deeper into who we are and what has created us, as you mentioned earlier, the wounding, the trauma, our upbringings, these are, and it sounds again so cliche, especially in men's work, is like, this is the lead that we turn into gold in our lives.
There's, yeah, the only way out is through, and in the pain lies our purpose. We've heard those terms, and it's one thing to like repost them and put them in our stories. It's something that I used to do often. I see oftentimes, men do. Like, that goes back to the term, the thing we spoke about. I feel sad, but I'm not feeling the sadness, right? It's like to say the purpose lies in the pain. It's like, it's one thing to say it and it sounds great because we can reference to all the movies and the powerful like hero's journey stories that kind of reveal that this person ended up stronger as he went through the pain and through the challenge. But like to go through our own is, it's to face off with those parts of ourselves that are uncomfortable. It's truly where the magic is, because it's a unique magic that it's like your own Excalibur, it's your own just understanding of what you're meant to bring into the world as your gift. And the only place you can get that is from the depths of your own story, the depths of your own pain, the depths of your own shadow, the depths of your own, just everything that makes you who you are. It's already in there, and I think that's another thing that oftentimes men come into men's work, think they look for the solution. I mean, we touched on this a couple of times, but they look for things to like the teachers and the space to be the actual solution, right? Not just blueprint, but this is the magic pill, and just being in this space. Like, well, no, you are the magic pill. Like, you have everything. There's nothing that you're looking for that's not already within you. You just got to excavate and use this space as a resource to find those answers.
Yeah, amen. Amen to that. Because it's, we look to others again, we're going into wanting someone to fix us, like, if I go and work with this teacher and I go to this retreat, then my life is going to be great. Or if I go to this workshop, then my relationship is going to be healed. And we often, and what we find is like that space, that retreat, that teacher is just trying to guide us inward, right? To help us with the excavation process. They're not doing the work for us, right? They're just maybe saying some words of pointers or asking questions that cause us to go a level deeper and find more of who we are, or more of what's getting in the way of us being who we desire to be.
There we go.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, I look at the time. The time is flying. I love these conversations where we just kind of like weave in between these different topics, but today's conversation just feels like it keeps coming back to this same bit that I just mentioned there. Is like, as you said, the answers are within us. The only way is through where are the healing that we desire, or the relationship change, or the healing from breakup isn't through searching outside of ourselves for some external thing, someone to fix us. Is our willingness to just like, am I willing to be with myself, or what is present with me right now, and take the lessons from that and take those forward into the next, and then take those lessons from that into the next, and can keep carrying on in that way with awareness and discernment.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really the process of embodiment. I think there's millions of pieces, if not billions. There's just so much content out there, so much information, so much, whether it be podcasts, books, reels, YouTube videos, like you name it, Google something, and you'll find pages of resources. There's the information that, all this information is designed to teach us how to be a better man, how to be the quote unquote the best man that we could be, how to level up, how to, XYZ. I mean, you can even use ChatGPT and put as many details and prompts in there about yourself as possible, and literally ask it, do the best you can to create an IKEA manual for this problem. And, until we take the action and make the mistake and feel the failure and feel the victory, like until we actually put it into practice, we can't embody and become that man that we want to be. Like it takes the trial and error. We got to step into the dojo and actually, feel our partner reject our attempt to create levity. Feel the industry kind of reject our attempt to invite people and enroll people into our vision for our business or the thing we create. But like the only way we can actually embody this like higher version of this future version of ourselves, this higher version of ourselves, this version of ourselves that we aspire to be, is to put it into practice, right? And to feel the experience of that practice.
Yeah. As you say that, I'm just like even feeling my own life and being like, man, where am I just like reading the thing, or am I overwhelming myself? It's just, it's a great practice to always be like, where's the action at in this area of my life, because like you said, there's so much information, and you can go to ChatGPT. And when you said that, I was laughing to myself because it's so easy to go, ChatGPT, solve this relationship problem for me. And ChatGPT will give you some really generic ass answer because that's all it can do, because everything is so nuanced. Everything is so particular to our own situations. And we have to have that feeling capacity, the emotional intelligence that you mentioned earlier to like make your own choices and decisions.
Yeah. I mean, I've literally received that from like ChatGPT associated like apps and stuff. How to win your girl back using ChatGPT, like, and kind of showing how ChatGPT helped me. I literally saw this maybe 2 months ago. It was a text. It was a text like how to create the perfect text to win your girlfriend back. And I even created a video of it. Like, here's how to win your girl back using ChatGPT. Don't, because you're only going to create a bigger wedge in the relationship. And then I think oftentimes the blow up later down the line ends up being much worse, right? The breakdown later down the line ends up being much worse because we're not actually solving the problem. We're just putting a Band-Aid on it and hoping that it works.
Yeah. Oh, brother, thank you for this conversation, man. It's just been beautiful to, talk more to you and get to know you better and hear your beautiful wisdom and, learn that ChatGPT is not the place to get your relationship advice and your relationship tidbits as well, people. It's not gonna work. But I imagine the listeners are, wanting to know where they can find out more about you, like, where they can listen to you, they can consume more of your content and find out, how to work with you, whether that's one-to-one or in your groups.
Yeah, well, I usually share the most on Instagram. So my Instagrams are Jose_Alejandro, and there I've got some links to my men's organization, Modern Renaissance Band, and that's at the MRM Official. And if you want to learn more about my work specifically, josealejandro.co. And we got some information there about our rites of passages, my wilderness rites of passages, our men's organization, and our program Training Grounds, as well as my one-on-one work and just everything else that I'm creating as well.
Thank you, brother. And listeners, if you've got value from this episode, send it to a friend, because there's probably a man in your life who will listen to what we've talked about today and take some value. And it's so useful to be given wisdom and given things that can actually help and take men into action, because so often men, we suffer in silence. We don't seek help. We don't offer our help to other men. So if you're listening to this and you're a man or you're a woman, send this over to a man you think you could be helped by what we talked about today, whether that's in his life, his relationship, or his business. But I'll let you all get off to the rest of your day, your evening, your gym session, wherever you are listening in from. Last thing for me to say is ciao, ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world. especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, oh, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.